Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX Eurozone. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky calls on Donald Trump to push Xi Jinping to cut support for Russia when they meet this week. He says China reducing imports of Russian energy would be a strong move after new US sanctions hit Moscow's oil firms. Zelensky also says that Russian troops have secured a foothold in Pokrovsk, calling the eastern city Moscow's main target. He says drones show about 200 Russian forces operating inside the city after more than a year of intense attempts to capture it. The Kremlin says it cannot assess the prospects for Ukraine peace talks, blaming Kyiv for pausing negotiations and warning foreign fighters will be targeted on the front lines. Moscow says partners will decide for themselves about buying Russian energy. Russia says Moscow was struck by drones for a second night, while President Zelensky says Kyiv is ready for peace talks but will not cave on territorial integrity. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko calls Lithuania's closure of the border a crazy scam, accusing Vilnius of unfriendly acts as regional tensions grow. UK government ministers name 2 military sites they want repurposed and aim to shut asylum hotels, part of a push to tighten control over migrant accommodation and national security. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban is pressing to reverse or ease sanctions on Russian oil, arguing Europe should re-engage energy supplies at more favourable prices. Now we start this hour in Europe's defining crisis, where the Kremlin has said it could not assess the prospects for peace negotiations over Ukraine and blamed Kyiv for pausing talks, while reiterating a series of wider claims about foreign involvement and energy policy. The Kremlin also addressed recent comments by US President Donald Trump, urging countries to stop buying Russian oil, saying Moscow had heard those calls, but many countries would decide for themselves how to proceed on energy purchases. Now, separately, in that same statement, Moscow has repeated allegations that foreign fighters were present on the front lines in Ukraine and added that Russian forces would destroy them. It also claimed that Russian military personnel frequently overhear foreign languages spoken on the Eastern Front. Independent verification of the Kremlin's contentions about the causes of the negotiation pause, the presence of foreign fighters and intercepted front-line communications was not available in the Kremlin's statement. Okay, we're now joined by Glenn Grant. He's an ex-advisor to the Defence Minister of Ukraine, and he joins us live from Riga in Latvia. Glenn, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. Some aggravating words coming out of the Kremlin today, blaming Kyiv for pausing these, for the pausing of peace talks, and also claiming there is foreign troops fighting on the Eastern Front of Ukraine. What's your analysis of those words coming out of Moscow today? Glenn, can you hear me? Glenn, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, very clearly, yeah.
Okay, Glenn. We've just heard that the Kremlin has blamed Kyiv for pausing talks, reiterating a series of wider claims about foreign involvement in energy policy. There's also claims coming out of Moscow saying that there are foreign fighters on the ground on that eastern front. Can I get your reaction to what the Kremlin has said? A possible reaction as well to the new US sanctions and how much it is affecting Russia's war machine?
Well, I guess from the nonsense coming out of the Kremlin at the moment, that as we say, the pips are squeaking, that they're under a bit of pressure. The sanctions are actually quite serious. I mean, I'd almost say this is the first time that the US has put in something that actually worries the Russians. The nonsense about peace talks is nonsense, because they've just said themselves that they're not intending to have any talks in Budapest, and then that they won't have talks unless all their demands are met. So they're sort of going back on themselves at the moment. It's I think it's best to say it's an interesting time, because with Zelensky making comments that he's willing to go for peace or peace talks, but he's not willing to compromise, basically, and Russia pretty much saying the same. I don't think we're going to go anywhere forward with peace talks, but Russia is clearly under pressure.
And what are your thoughts on this statement, Glenn, about the foreign troops that Russia claims are fighting on the front lines in the east? It says that it's heard foreign languages spoken fighting for the side of Ukraine. Are there reports on this?
I mean, but it's complete. I'm not going to say it's complete nonsense. I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing I've heard for a long time from Russia, because it's very open in Ukraine that there are volunteers from countries all over the world fighting on the front line. So of course they've heard foreign voices. I mean, the Foreign Legion is public. I mean, it's public. People know who's in it. It's on Facebook, and the deaths for foreign soldiers are all in the museum. Pictures of them and their life stories are in the museum in Kiev. So for Russia to suddenly raise this is obviously clearly more about internal consumption than it is about external consumption, and they're trying to show why they're losing and why things are not going as well as they want.
Thank you very much. Do stay with us. We have some further news coming out of the conflict, and Ukraine has targeted Moscow with drones for the second consecutive night, injuring one civilian in the Bryansk region. The Russian Defense Ministry has stated that air defense units have destroyed 17 Ukrainian drones, including one heading towards Moscow and several over the Kaluga and Bryansk regions. Additionally, Moscow's mayor has confirmed that emergency services were dispatched to the site where one of the drones fell, though no damage was reported. Meanwhile, in a separate development, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that his country is ready for peace talks, but will not make any territorial concessions to Moscow. He has further stressed that Kiev will not withdraw troops from any additional territory, as Russia has demanded and is open to negotiations in any neutral country except Russia or Belarus. This comes as plans for a highly anticipated summit between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Budapest this month has been, of course, put on hold after Moscow insisted that Ukraine must cede more territory as a condition for a ceasefire. Okay. We are now joined by Andrea Lucidi. He's a war reporter and he joins us live from Civitavecchi in Italy. Thank you very much for joining us, Andrea, here on the broadcast. Of course, we hear of more aerial attacks going from Ukraine across to Russia. However, this anticipated summit between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, it's supposedly not going to happen anymore. The Russia says that it's merely been postponed. Donald Trump says it's cancelled. What are your thoughts about the current relationship and the way the war is going for the Russians, even given that you have a trade negotiator in Washington at the moment, speaking of a positive future between the Russian and the US relationship?
Well, as a war correspondent that it's based in Russia and Donbass, I can hear every day the Russian news, the Russian newspapers, and there till now there is optimistic perspective for the negotiation between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, because for the Russian policy, Donald Trump, and for the Kremlin also, Donald Trump represented an alternative for the American policy, because with the administration of Biden was quite impossible to take any negotiation or also any contact for plan a possible meeting for future negotiation. And Donald Trump said that the meeting was cancelled due to the useless moment. He said that this moment is useless for any negotiation because from his perspective, there are no useful times, useful proposed from the Russian side for have a negotiation in this moment, but for the Kremlin, the meeting is only postponed from for another moment. And this is clear from my point of view that for the Kremlin, the door is always open for future meeting with Donald Trump. It's interesting to note that also the foreign minister of the Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov, said that it's mandatory to discuss about the deeply causes of the conflict. And it's a topic that Zelensky refused at all to treat. Yesterday, Sergei Lavrov said that the Russian Federation recognized Ukraine as a state, but it's not recognized the actual regime of Zelensky, and that the Russian Federation is ready to accept Ukraine as a neutral state, as a state that refuse any military alliance with the West and the East, as a neutral country. But this is at the moment not acceptable for Zelensky. And it's, from my point of view, it's also interesting to note that the Kremlin is more interested to negotiate with Washington and not with Kiev. And yes, this is important because from the Russian side, there is the point for the actual conflict in Ukraine. It's not came from Ukraine directly, but is only a proxy war from the US.
Glenn, I wanted to come back to you next. Does Kiev feel like it has enough leverage now, especially with the United States, militarily or politically, to refuse these concessions outright?
That's a good question. I mean, I think they do, but I mean, I think that it's a good point that Andrea made about that the Russia is looking more towards America. And I think that they understand that they're not going to get anything out of the Zelensky government in a hurry. But I think it's more than that, that it's the country is totally behind what Zelensky is saying at the moment. So it's not like there's any separation between government and society. Society is not willing to compromise. There's been too much blood spilt and too much ground taken for there to be compromise. So, they can try what they like with America, but I think Zelensky will just keep going, relying on Europe and the other countries that support them, like Japan, South Korea, Australia, to help them through the difficult times.
Yes, and Lucy, Andrea, I just wanted to come to you finally before we move on. Some would say this is a forced annexation that the Kremlin is proposing. How is this a proposal? How is forced annexation a peace proposal rather than a demand for a surrender?
Well, at this moment, after the war and all the resources that the Russian Federation spends for this conflict, it's impossible that the Kremlin will accept a treaty without the possibility to take the 4 regions that the Russian Federation claimed. So Zaporozhye Oblast, Kherson Oblast, Lugansk People's Republic, and Donetsk People's Republic that are ready for the constitution of the Russian Federation are a part of the Russian territory. So I think that a realistic future for this region can be a solution like between North Korea and South Korea. So maybe the future border will be the contact line. And for this reason, also the Russian army try to advance at any moment for make more pressure to the government of Kiev. But for the future of Ukraine and Russia, after the war, they need to resume any relationship, because without relationship and without communication between Ukraine and Russia, can't be any peace and any future for the people that are living in the claimed regions.
Okay, thank you very much. Do stay with us, gentlemen. We are moving on to our next update, where Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has sharply criticised Lithuania's decision to close its border with Belarus, calling it a crazy scam and accusing Vilnius of waging what he described as a hybrid war that threatens the Chinese economy. The remarks come a day after Lithuanian Prime Minister Inga Rutien announced that her country would begin shooting down smuggler balloons crossing from Belarus. According to authorities, the balloons repeatedly disrupted air traffic in the Baltic nation. Lukashenko dismissed those claims as absurd, saying that Lithuania was using the issue as a pretext for further confrontation. Relations between the two countries have been strained for years, particularly over Lithuania's support for Belarus's exiled opposition. We're now once again joined by Andrea Lucidi and Glenn Grant to discuss this further. Glenn, I wanted to start with you first on this development. Is this about smuggling or is this about a new front in Europe's hybrid warfare with Belarus?
I'll turn it around, it's the other way. Is this a new front for Belarus's hybrid warfare with Europe? Because the action is coming out of Belarus, it's not coming out of Lithuania. Lithuania is just purely on the defensive in all this. But I would add that the border has effectively been closed, except for a couple of places, all the way from Estonia in the north, right the way through to Poland, and across those bits of Poland linking there. And it's purely and simply because Belarus keeps, sending immigrants across the border, and keeps doing things that they shouldn't be doing, flying drones and now flying balloons and stopping the airport. So Lukashenko's got absolutely nothing, no ground to stand on at all. So it's just blather, and he obviously did not think that European Union countries would stand up to his nonsenses. Well, now they are, because when you start affecting civil air traffic, you start affecting money and business, and I don't think Europe is too happy with this.
Yes, indeed. I wanted to move to you next, Andrea. Do you think Belarus is exploiting China's trade interests to gain geopolitical leverage against the European Union here?
Well, the People's Republic of China is the first and the most important partner for the Russian Federation and for Belarus. This is one of the reasons because the sanctions from the West are not so effective to the Russian and Belarusian economies. The closure of the Lithuanian border, I think, from my point of view, is an escalation that it's came from Europe, from the West, because the Baltic Republic from 2022 start to make a lot of action, a lot of hostile actions against Belarus also, with this accusation to use the migrants against the European Union. But I'm located in Italy now. In Italy, also in the south, there is a constant flux of migration from the North Africa, but Europe never accused Libya or Egypt or Algeria to use migrants for geopolitical use or for make pressure to Italy or to Europe. This is a global problem, and Belarus is only a way to reach Europe for migrants that came from the east. But the closure of the border, of course, can be interpreted from Belarus and also from all the countries that use Belarus as a way for the trade to Europe as a hostile act.
Yes, thank you very much, Glenn Grant and Andrea Lucidi, for joining us here on the programme. We will, of course, bring you all updates coming out of the Russia-Ukraine conflict as we get them here on NewsX World. But now over to the United Kingdom, where the government is set to house hundreds of asylum seekers in 2 military sites as it works to end the use of hotels for migrant accommodation. As per reports, the Cameron Barracks in Inverness and the Crowborough Army Training Camp in East Sussex have been identified to house about 900 men by the end of next month. Speaking on the issue in a recent interview, Defence Minister Luke Pollard has supported the proposal, but has also added that cost assessments and security measures are still underway. Moreover, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has instructed Home Office and Defence officials to expedite efforts to locate more suitable military facilities. The UK government is also considering industrial and temporary sites, as well as disused buildings, to reduce pressure on local communities and lower budget costs. We now move on over back to Eastern Europe, where Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán says he will discuss new US sanctions on Russian oil with President Trump in Washington next week. The US recently imposed sanctions on Russia's 2 largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, a move that's also been backed by the European Union. Orbán warned that the sanctions could trigger energy shortages and soaring prices in Hungary, which remains heavily dependent on Russian oil and gas. Hungary's foreign minister says the government is still assessing the impact of the measures, which have yet to take effect. Meanwhile, the European Commission insists that Europe's oil supplies remain secure as member states hold emergency reserves for at least 90 days. Pressure is mounting on Hungary and Slovakia to reduce their reliance on Moscow's energy exports as the EU plans to phase out all Russian fuel imports by 2027. Now we move over to the Middle East, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived at the court on Tuesday to continue his testimony on his ongoing corruption trial. This is the first time a sitting Israeli leader has taken the stand as a criminal defendant. His appearance comes as his defense attorneys threatened to resign after the Jerusalem District Court ordered 4 hearings a week, with Netanyahu testifying in 3 of them. Netanyahu faces fraud and breach of trust charges in cases 1000 and 2000 and bribery in case 4000. He denies any wrongdoing, calling the cases a political coup. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has urged a pardon, characterizing the allegations as a trifling matter of cigars and champagne. His lawyers say the schedule is disproportionate, breaches the basic rule of government, and leaves him unable to manage national security challenges. The court says the pace is needed after years of delays, warning his testimony alone could run until April of 2026 and the trial in 2027. Thousands of people in Vietnam were evacuated from their homes after record rainfall of more than 1 meter in 24 hours submerged a central city. According to reports, 3 measuring stations in the city of Hue recorded rainfall from 1 meter to 1.7 meters in a 24-hour period from Sunday to Monday. Heavy rainfall has inundated Vietnam's central coastal region since the weekend, closing schools and flooding the former imperial city of Hue. According to the Environment Ministry of Vietnam, more than 8,600 people in 4 central provinces were evacuated to schools and other public buildings since Saturday due to risks from severe flooding and landslides. And that's all we have time for on NewsX Eurozone. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.